In 1974, Sweden became the first country in the world to replace maternity leave with parental leave, not leave for mothers. Parental leave, for both parents. It was a radical idea at the time. The notion that fathers were not just providers, but actual parents with an equal role in raising their children. Sweden didn't just suggest fathers get involved. They wrote it into law, and then they spent the next 50 years watching what happened. What they discovered changed the global conversation about parenting forever. Children with actively involved fathers are 43% more likely to earn top grades. They are 33% less likely to repeat a grade. They show stronger emotional regulation, higher empathy, better self-control, and the benefits don't stop when childhood ends. These children grow up to have healthier relationships, higher earnings, and a fundamentally different understanding of what it means to be a parent. But none of this happened by accident. It happened because Sweden looked at parenthood and asked a question no other country was willing to ask. What if fathers were not just helpers, but equals? Let me take you to January 1st, 1995. Sweden had been offering shared parental leave for 2 decades, but the numbers told a frustrating story. Mothers were taking almost all of it. Fathers were taking almost none. The policy existed on paper, but culture hadn't caught up. So the government made a decision that was controversial then and would be unimaginable in most countries today. They reserved 1 month of parental leave exclusively for fathers. 1 month that could not be transferred to the mother. Use it or lose it. They called it the Daddy Month. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Before the reform, only 43% of Swedish fathers took any parental leave at all. After the Daddy Month was introduced, that number jumped to 75%. Fathers who had never considered staying home with their newborns were suddenly spending weeks alone with their babies, feeding them, soothing them, learning to read their cries, and something unexpected happened. The fathers didn't just take the 1 month and go back to work. Many took more. The Daddy Month had broken the ice. It had given men permission to be parents in a way society had never allowed before. Sweden didn't stop there. In 2002, they added a second reserved month for fathers. In 2016, a third. Today, Sweden offers 480 days of paid parental leave per child, 16 months, and 90 of those days are reserved, exclusively for each parent, and cannot be transferred. Today, roughly 90% of Swedish fathers take parental leave. They account for nearly 30% of all parental leave days taken in the country. On any given Tuesday morning in Stockholm, you will see fathers pushing strollers, fathers at the playground, fathers sitting in cafes with babies, strapped to their chests. The Swedish word for them is latte pappor, latte dads, and they are not the exception. They are the norm. But here is where the story gets truly remarkable. Because the real question is not whether fathers take the leave. The real question is, what happens to the children? In 2020, researchers at the University of Cambridge published a study that captured something essential about the father-child bond. They found that children whose fathers made time to play with them from a very young age showed significantly stronger self-control and emotional regulation as they grew older. Not because fathers are better than mothers, but because fathers tend to play differently. Where mothers often engage in nurturing, comforting play, holding, soothing, talking softly, fathers are more likely to engage in what researchers call rough-and-tumble play, tickling, chasing, wrestling, throwing children in the air and catching them. It looks chaotic, it sounds loud, and according to neuroscience, it is doing something extraordinary inside a child's developing brain. Rough-and-tumble play activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, decision-making, and emotional regulation. When a father wrestles with his child and then suddenly stops, the child has to learn to read the signal. The game is over. Time to calm down. This back and forth, excitement followed by regulation, is a training ground for the brain. Children learn that strong emotions come and go. They learn to handle excitement without becoming overwhelmed. They learn to stop when someone says stop. These are not small skills. They are the foundation of emotional intelligence. A 2022 meta-analysis published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology examined decades of research on father-child rough-and-tumble play. The findings were consistent across countries, across cultures, across income levels. Children who engaged in regular physical play with their fathers showed better social skills, fewer behavioral problems, and stronger emotional regulation. They were better at making friends. They were less aggressive with peers. They could handle frustration without melting down, and the effect was strongest when the play happened in early childhood, those first 5 years when the brain is developing at its fastest rate. But play is only a piece of the puzzle. A comprehensive literature review published in 2024 by the National Institutes of Health synthesized research on father involvement and emotion regulation during early childhood. The conclusion was unambiguous. Fathers who are actively involved in daily caregiving, feeding, bathing, bedtime routines, not just weekend play, raise children with measurably better emotional outcomes. These children are more secure, more resilient, better able to name and manage their feelings. The reason, researchers believe, is that when fathers are involved, children are exposed to a wider range of emotional experiences and problem-solving styles. Mothers and fathers, on average, respond to children's emotions differently. Mothers tend to soothe and validate. Fathers tend to distract and redirect. Neither is better. But having both gives children a fuller emotional toolkit. And then there are the academic outcomes. The Children's Bureau in the United States analyzed longitudinal data and found something striking. Children with actively involved fathers are 43% more likely to earn top grades. They are 33% less likely to repeat a grade. They are twice as likely to participate in extracurricular activities. They have higher graduation rates, higher college enrollment, higher lifetime earnings. The father effect, as researchers call it, is not about genetics. It is about presence. It is about the daily accumulation of small moments, helping with homework, asking about their day, showing up at school events, that compound over the time into measurable differences in life outcomes. But perhaps the most surprising finding in the research is what happens to the fathers themselves, because when men become involved parents, their own brains change. A landmark study from 2025, featured on the Ezra Klein podcast, examined how modern fatherhood is literally rewiring men's brains. When fathers spend significant time caring for their infants, not just playing, but doing the diaper changes, the night feedings, the soothing, their brains undergo changes similar to those observed in new mothers. Oxytocin levels rise. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes more attuned to their baby's cues. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drops during caregiving. The brain physically adapts to the role of primary caregiver. This is not metaphor. This is neuroplasticity. The brain changes in response to what you do, and caring for a baby is one of the most powerful triggers for that change. This has profound implications for the Swedish model. When fathers stay home for months at a time, not just a week or two, their brains actually rewire for caregiving. They become more attuned, more responsive, more emotionally present. And this rewiring persists long after the leave ends. Swedish fathers who took extended parental leave were still more involved in their children's lives years later. They were more likely to share household responsibilities equally. They were more likely to take sick days when their children were ill. The leave didn't just give them time with their baby. It fundamentally changed who they were as parents. And now let's talk about the gender equality spiral, because this is where the Swedish experiment becomes a case study in how policy shapes culture. When fathers take parental leave, mothers return to work sooner. Their careers suffer fewer interruptions. The gender pay gap narrows. In Sweden, women's labor force participation is among the highest in the world, and the gender wage gap is among the lowest. This is not a coincidence. It is a direct result of a system that treats parenting as a shared responsibility rather than a mother's burden. When employers know that both men and women will take parental leave, they stop viewing female employees as a liability. The playing field begins to level. But the most important effect may be on the children themselves. Children who grow up seeing their fathers cook, clean, and care for them internalize a model of equality that shapes their own future relationships. Girls raised by involved fathers are more likely to pursue ambitious careers. They are less likely to accept unequal divisions of household labor in their own partnerships. Boys raised by involved fathers are more likely to become involved fathers themselves. They are more likely to value emotional connection over traditional masculinity. The cycle perpetuates itself across generations. Equality learned at home becomes equality lived in the world. A 2023 working paper from the Swedish Institute for Evaluation of Labor Market and Education Policy examined the long-term effects of the 1,995 Daddy Month reform on the children themselves. The researchers tracked children born around the reform cutoff and compared their outcomes years later. The findings were subtle but significant. Children whose fathers were induced by the reform to take more leave showed better educational performance and slightly higher earnings in young adulthood. The effect was modest. Policy alone cannot erase all inequalities, but it was real, and it suggested something powerful. When you change fathers' behavior, you change children's lives. So where does the rest of the world stand? The picture is stark. According to the OECD's 2025 report on paid leave for fathers, Spain now leads the world with 16 weeks of paid paternity leave. Sweden, Estonia, and Iceland follow closely behind with generous shared systems. Norway offers 15 weeks reserved for fathers. Portugal, Slovenia, Lithuania all have dedicated paternity leave. And then there is the United States, the only first-world country without any guaranteed paid parental leave at the national level. 0 weeks. Nothing. American fathers who want to be present for their newborns must cobble together vacation days, sick leave, and the goodwill of their employers. Many take no leave at all, not because they don't want to, but because they literally cannot afford to. The consequences are not abstract. They are written in the health outcomes of American families. Higher rates of postpartum depression among mothers who return to work too soon. Higher infant stress levels. Lower breastfeeding rates. Fathers who report feeling disconnected from their children during the most critical bonding period. And children who miss out on the neurological and emotional benefits that come from having an actively involved father in those first precious months. This is not about blaming individual fathers who cannot take leave. It is about recognizing that the system is broken. When a country gives fathers 0 guaranteed paid time with their newborns, it is making a statement about what fatherhood is worth. And the statement could not be clearer. But here is the hope, because the Swedish experiment has proven something that should give every parent in every country reason to believe that change is possible. Before 1995, Swedish fathers were no more involved than fathers in most Western countries. They loved their children. They wanted to be present, but cultural norms and workplace expectations kept them at arm's length from the daily work of parenting. The Daddy Month changed that. Not instantly, not completely, but over time, the policy reshaped the culture. And culture, once reshaped, reinforces the policy. It becomes self-sustaining. Today, if you are a Swedish father who does not take parental leave, you are the outlier. Your friends will ask why. Your colleagues will find it strange. Your own children may one day ask why you weren't there. The stigma has flipped. The expectation is presence, not absence. And that change, from a culture where fathers were applauded for changing a single diaper to a culture where fathers are expected to be equal. Parents is the real Swedish revolution. So what can parents do, even in countries without Swedish-level policies? The research offers clear guidance. Even small increases in father involvement produce measurable benefits for children. You do not need 16 months of paid leave to read your child a bedtime story every night. You do not need a government mandate to put your phone down and play on the floor. The research on rough-and-tumble play does not require a daddy month. It requires 10 minutes of wrestling on the carpet after dinner. The research on emotional regulation does not require policy reform. It requires a father who stops, kneels down, and says, "I see that you're upset. You know what, let's talk about it instead of go ask your mother." The system matters. Policy matters. But the daily choices of individual fathers matter too. And every time a father chooses to be present, to change the diaper, to attend the parent-teacher conference, to take the sick day when his child has a fever, to normalize male caregiving in his workplace, he is part of the revolution. He is rewiring his own brain. He is reshaping his child's future. He is building the kind of world where the next generation of fathers won't have to fight the same battles, because gender equality does not start in boardrooms or parliaments. It starts in living rooms. It starts when a father looks at his newborn and decides, "I will be there," not just as a provider, not just as a weekend playmate, but as a parent, fully, equally, every single day. And if an entire country can change, so can one family.